Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Power Driven Podcast. Today, we are talking about everything you need to know to double the power of your 12 valve Cummins. In fact, we did a video on this like 7 years ago. We got with the Diesel Tech magazine. Remember that little guy drove
They
all the way down
brought
from
a
Idaho?
really clean truck, and I think it had
Yeah.
like 70,000 miles
Yeah.
or something.
And it was untouched virgin truck. It was awesome. And we took it and we doubled it. So we're going to watch that video, see what is still relevant, see if there's some technology that has maybe changed in the last 12 years. And we're going to go over this thing and we're going to watch it and kind of, give our opinions on what is better now than this video and maybe go over some higher power things as well. So anyway, we're going to have a lot of fun with this. If you're a 12 valve Cummins guy, want to make some more power, you want to hang out. So yeah.
So let's see how much power a stock 96 180 horsepower truck made 7 years ago on our Mustang chassis dyno.
It's going to be brutal. Let's go. Roll the video. We decided to install one of our complete fuel packages. For this
baby
particular
Todd.
build, we're going to use our 400 horsepower fuel package. What that gives you is all the components needed on the fueling side to achieve 400 horsepower. Now, this includes our 055 delivery valves, which are a modest increase, a nice towing delivery valve, governor springs, so you can wrap out the RPM a little bit higher. It includes 7x9 injectors. What that means, when you hear these numbers, there are 7 holes in the injector tip, and each hole is 9,000th of an inch in diameter. So if you see injectors 5x12, 7x9, 6x13, that's what those mean. Also in this truck, we're going to increase injection timing. A lot of people think this is a very difficult, highly technical process. It's not terribly difficult when we supply this degree wheel, and it's actually quite simple to do. Finally, we're going to top it off with our AFC Live. This is going to give him complete control of his fuel.
Oh my
He can
gosh.
turn the fuel up, turn it down.
the gauge
He'll
is.
be
Is
able to
there a
dial in
gauge
his
there?
EGT for whatever trailer he's towing. With this, he'll have total control over his fuel, make driving his truck real easy, real fun. I mean, it's really impressive. I mean, it's been a long time since I've done a stock truck, but there's not a lot of parts there, honestly, as far as fuel is concerned. It's pretty simple upgrades.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, look at that AFC Live. That's like the old, I don't think that's our first version, maybe a second version on that one, but the box is bigger. The gauge was huge. We have a much smaller gauge now. And the bracket.
It looks like we used Velcro back then to hold it on. It
think we
doesn't even
did.
have an actual mounting bracket.
Yeah, look at our beautiful display
legit.
bench there. It's the top of an old toolbox.
I think it was a snap-on toolbox, though.
Hey,
You gotta give him
for-
credit.
give
It's an old snap-on
Yeah.
toolbox.
So anyway, the 055 delivery valves, I think that's
That's
nothing changed. That's like solid, and I love those delivery valves even to this day.
Governor springs, same story. Still definitely want to do some governor springs.
And those are quality governor spring. Even today,
Those are the same ones. Yeah.
I wouldn't say there's a better governor spring on the market than those.
Yeah.
So
And then the injectors, though, I kind of saw you smirk a little bit when you saw 7x9s. Will's over here like, we could do a lot better than that now.
So back in the day, the whole point of the 7x9 is you had factory hole size, so you had the atomization, but you're getting a couple extra holes, so you get a little better fuel dispersion. But they don't penetrate the cylinders well at high RPM. And this new PowerJet technology just destroys those old 7-hole.
I mean, 5 holes, just in my opinion, 5 holes destroy a 7-hole, and then power jets destroy a 5-hole. Like back in before the power driven times, I did some testing with 7x9s versus some 5x13s. Mathematically, they should equate to about the same area. And you can go on Cummins forum and find that review, 5 versus 7-hole injector testing. But no, 7 holes were not for me. And some people really like 7 holes. I think it's the bigger guys like running like a 7x11 or 12. It may not be as bad, but those smaller sets, I did not enjoy them.
There's a bunch of different spray patterns in 7-hole too, because
That's
back
true.
then with a 7x9, we weren't changing the hole. We were using a Bosch nozzle that those particular ones were a 148 spray pattern. So they were a little cleaner. Some of the other 7 holes that are a Denso out of like a John Deere application, those ones kind of sucked.
Yeah. I mean, I know mine were marketed as 148s or whatever. I remember it was just a smidge off of what I wanted to be a 145. But knowing what I know now, what they were marketed as may have not been what they were actually. That is a possibility.
Did you buy those from Power Driven?
I did not.
Okay. So the company you bought them from shall remain nameless.
They definitely will, yes. But
And-
either way, they did not.
Another thing we've definitely
Did
learned.
they give your diesel a lot of power?
I mean, they definitely flowed more fuel, but I did. So I had those injectors in it, and I had a HY35. I was trying to go for as best spool up, best torque. And hence, I wanted to try the 7 holes. And I remember driving my brother's truck, which was ultimately the same, except it was bone stock without a plate. And I drove it to town and I was like, I ruined my truck. This drives so much better. Like, what have I done? And that's when I like kind of started reverting back to stock, and I put those 5x13s in. And I was like, oh wow, like I just got 90% of the gains back.
I do wonder if you got a pretty cheap injector, if those nozzles were manufactured by kind of a low quality stuff. I mean, we've seen that here. Like we've seen, some stuff come through and you get it under a microscope. It looks pretty rough.
Oh yeah, I mean, you get a set of 7x9s, and maybe some of them are 7x8s and some are 7x10s. Like, I mean, that's
All
not
over the
even that bad in today's
Yeah,
like what we've seen.
yeah, but these injectors. I remember driving this truck, and they're definitely way better than a stock injector truck. So I'd say maybe you got a bad batch,
I definitely could have. And I had HY there, and I was like going for torque, and they did not make the torque that they were supposed to.
which is interesting because the reason we like the 7 holes is they seem to like spool better.
Yeah, they kind of
Mine were
got
definitely
stuff going.
hazier. Like 5x13s cleaned up the haze everywhere. Now, if you didn't care about smoke, maybe you could have gotten them cleaned up to spool faster or whatever. But when I was using smoke as my guideline, like I didn't want smoke and I wanted to spool, the 5-hole 5x13s that I tested, those ones that I tested did like considerably better.
Interesting. I will say in this video, our goal with this video was just to show you like the bare minimum things needed to achieve the doubling your power. Like looking at this stuff now, I'm like, well, I'd do a rack plug. I definitely,
Oh yeah.
a
Yeah,
few
for sure.
things.
And like I say, like the injectors I tested were not these injectors, so I can't speak for those ones right there. But yeah, in my experience, 7 holes aren't necessarily the play.
I noticed on the AFC Live, I didn't see the Max Travel kit in there. I think we might have put one in there, but I don't think we had the power driven AFC foot back then that you
Oh,
could
yeah.
to make it easy. And so we were grinding and cutting and doing all kinds of stuff to
Yeah.
get fuel. If we even, I don't really remember. I don't
I'm
remember
sure that's what we
with this
did. I'm
truck,
sure we ground it flat, but yeah, now with our new foot, that's so much easier. And so anyway, yeah, the fueling is pretty simple on this build. There's a few more things you could do, but for the
But
power,
for double your horsepower, like that's it.
yeah, when you start as low as this guy starts, it's not hard to do. So anyway, let's keep going from it. See what else pops up here. It's a good idea to support those with some other modifications. First and foremost is we're going to put some gauges in. We want to be able to monitor our EGT. Classic.
E
We want to know how much boost we're making. So those are coming in right away. We have a good set of ISPRO gauges. Also, we're going to want to upgrade our clutch. The stock clutch is not going to handle this power for a very long time. So we're going to put in a South Bend clutch rated for about 425
Still good
horsepower.
clutch.
Yeah.
Also, we're going to run a full MBRP 4-inch
shiny,
exhaust.
Beautiful stainless
It'll make this thing
exhaust.
breathe real good. With all these modifications, we expect the power to go up dramatically.
Well, that's ISPRO. I haven't seen ISPRO for a long time. I had those gauges in my truck years ago, but we kind of we're not happy with the ISPROs. They're a very quality unit. I've never had any fail on me.
It's just kind of, I don't know how best to describe it. It's like getting an old piece of machinery from World War II. Like it works and does its job, but no frills, kind of slow, kind of clunky, kind of heavy.
Loud. I remember listening to those things.
Yeah. And so like one of the reasons we placed them is the EGT max is at 1600 and I wanted more than that. The boost gauge didn't go very high and I wanted higher boost ranges. So we just ended up making our own gauges,
since then. And obviously we'd put those in now, but yeah,
Installing our gauges is a little easier the way
Yeah.
that the wire kind of daisy chains
Yeah.
and stuff. There's just nothing wrong with the Isopro. They're just kind of, they haven't really been updated. They're just
Yeah.
kind of what they are.
that MBRP exhaust looked freaking good. That was a stainless. I remember that was a stainless unit.
I don't even know if you can buy stainless exhaust
Yeah.
anymore from MBRP. I mean, I think you can get 409, but that looked like 304. That was beautiful exhaust. But maybe you still can. MBRP
What's
still around.
interesting is we didn't put an intake on this truck. Like I know we left the stock turbo because we wanted to show that, but I guess I wanted to show like you don't even need to upgrade your air filter for this. I mean, we're not making a lot of power with this truck. Even
Yeah.
double is not a lot of power.
But we've learned you will more quickly destroy your turbo without
Yeah.
intake. You start pushing it hard and it will.
overspeed it
It'll.
and we probably gave up some power. Like we hit the number, but we probably would have hit more with a simple air intake.
Yeah.
So anyway, just kind of funny the stuff you do years ago, but I mean, we just wanted to do the bare minimum, and that wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
So I think after this, they just go through a big install section of the video. I don't think we need to watch that. It's a podcast. They can't watch it anyway. So let's kind of skip forward to where the install's done, and we're about to put this in the dyno.
I think we're going to go right to the results of the dyno.
Oh, so do we have the original dyno run before we have
That's this one right here.
okay, so
Because
the
we
dyno-
put gauges on so we could see what the max EGT and stuff was.
So we did the dyno run, just the gauges, then which would not affect performance. Okay,
just so that
cool.
we could see that it hit 1200 degrees and hit about
So is this
19 pounds of boost.
a California manual trans? Is that why it's 180?
I thought this was a 96.
95.
It's a 95? Oh, it's a
Yeah.
160.
160 pump. Okay.
Okay.
I thought it was a 96.
Power to make.
146.8 and 383.7.
Okay, so this truck makes 146 horsepower and 380 foot-pounds of torque to the tire without any correction at all. Wow. Wow, I had no idea. I mean, it's been such a long time since I've been in a stock truck.
I told you I wasn't gonna make it.
Oh, this is the gutless, man. They are known for being slow stock. And it was. That dyno run took forever. I'm like,
Yeah.
you get used to the trucks we drive with now, like they rip through the window. I could have had my lunch while I was doing that run. I mean, it took forever to get through that window.
So it's a manual. It's a 175 horse factory truck. So 146. I mean,
To the
it's
tire.
actually not really that bad of power.
Yeah. And 383 foot-pounds. Is that what I heard I say? Like 380 foot-pounds of torque. So yeah, to get a 12 valve to, right around 300, a little less than, I mean, what's that? 296, 292, something like that. What was it? 146?
146. You need
So
292 to double it.
Yeah.
So about 300 to double.
So we got a 400 horsepower fuel package in this, as it said, which, I know we didn't get to 400 horsepower because we didn't change the turbo, but there will be extra fuel in this truck. If we did upgrade the intake, we would have made more power. There's enough fuel there now for more than we're going to make with this truck. But now that the install's done, we kind of went through a little install montage, all the parts are put in the truck. I think now we're going to put it back on the dyno in this video and see what the power difference was.
Do that turbo spool a little better, a little more whistle there.
Before we had boost and EGT
I know,
on the
I'm
dyno
like-
itself.
I'm like, where's the data? Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
I was trying to look for it. I was like, where'd it go?
There we go. 300. All right, so we got it. We just cracked 300 horsepower, 300.3 exactly, with torque 890.2. So
890.
huge torque. Again, we're limited by the turbo on this thing. If we went hardcore with our tuning, we could probably get another 20 or 30 horsepower with this turbo. But doing that kind of hurts the street friendliness, the good towing characteristics. So for this truck, good towing, 300 horsepower to the ground. We've doubled the power, runs good. It's gonna be a real fun truck. Man, that just shows you what Dodge did to neuter those things. Like we picked up 600 foot-pounds of torque to the ground. I mean, just think about that. The truck's still only 300 horsepower, and we're almost 900 foot-pounds of torque to the ground.
Well, it's not like they had a transmission or a clutch that could hold it.
Yeah, like I remember later in this video, we kind of go over like the stock run versus the modified run. You can really see how the calibration holds the fuel back a lot until it was so bad. So it's just like, golly, there's so much potential in that engine, which is why it's such a popular platform, because it's not hard to get a bunch of power out
I mean,
of it.
back then there was nothing you could buy that, with an hour under the hood, you could add hundreds of foot-pounds of torque and horsepower to it,
Yeah, I remember taking that guy for a drive, and even at this point in our business, we were pretty accustomed to more power. I mean, before we even started Power Driven Diesel, we were accustomed to more power. And I get in the truck and I'm like, that ride's pretty good. And he gets in there, he's like mind blown. He's like flipping out. He's like, I cannot believe this thing. He's like, he's just dying. I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
I mean, look at the graphs. I mean, like
Yeah.
that is you'll notice that for sure.
Yeah, massive changing graphs. So I don't, some people can watch this, some people are hearing, but I'm looking at the dyno graph right now. And there's an upper red line and an upper green line. The upper red line is the torque of the stock unit, and the upper green line is the torque of the modified unit, right?
The upper red line is stock. Yes.
And you can really see how the calibration neutered the torque. They held the
It's
fuel.
kind of
up.
like an S-shaped curve with a little bit inverse, and the
Trying to
other
keep
one's
the
like a
torque out of it.
parabola. It's
Yep.
like a little rainbow curve,
Yeah, in this video we go over how the reason that was so bad is the stock AFC spring was so stiff. It needed a lot of boost to overcome to actually let the fuel come in. And so I think that helps the engine be at a higher RPM level, so it gets rid of that high torque. And you can see if they had just changed the spring, it would have made a higher torque number, because they didn't bring the fuel until it's past peak torque.
So, yay, we did it back then. There's obviously things we'd change at that power level for, let's say, reliability. If you had a little more budget, one thing I noticed right away, I didn't see anything about a lift pump upgrade.
Yeah.
160 pumps like lift pumps. Factory ones sometimes are pretty worn and tired. Little hot rod lift pump, drop right in, bolt in.
Yeah. They'd be good for even quite a bit more power. Those things will handle a lot more power than this is asking for.
Let's do this a little different. obviously we talked about injectors. Like if we were to do this build again right now, we would do injectors different. We'd put a good injector in there. They just seem to run cleaner, like a power jet, run cleaner, make a little bit better
Probably
power.
just a stage 1 power jet's all
Yep.
you'd need for that goal.
Yep. Would use the same governor springs, 055s, love them still,
Yep.
different gauges, but the rest of the build was pretty close.
Yeah.
If you just did this build, Will, what would you do? Like what would be your next step? This is your work truck that
So
you like having fun, but it's to tow
So if I
trailers.
like had to tow a lot with it, I think that you won't have as good of EGT control as you could have with a little better turbo. So I
it makes 300. You're not really gonna be able to tow with that.
Yeah. So I mean, having fun, it would be just fine. But if I was actually trying to use, let's say it was a hot shot tower, or I had to race a camper up the mountain, race
Mhm.
Myer, I'd want a little more turbo on there. So I'd go right to that Aggressor 6064.
And that would get you better like EGT control at that 300 horsepower level, so you can actually use
way
it.
better EGT control. And then, truth be told, there's not a lot of trucks out there with 70 or 80,000 miles. If you have 150 or 200,000, I'll bet your stock turbo is getting pretty tired. It's not going to live a long life cranking out 35 pounds of boost or 40 pounds of boost. You want something fresh with a good, good oiling mods in the bearing. Those aggressive turbos are pretty tough. They're brand new.
Yeah.
So I would go right for a turbo there.
And while you're in there, I dang sure would do the manifold.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. We got away with that because that was a fresher, lower mileage truck. An older truck, you might not even be able to get the manifold back on it because
Yeah.
it shrunk so much. Might have broken bolts already.
And it's super common, even if your manifold looks good, once you turn it up, you're putting a little bit more heat cycle through it, and it can start acting up like very shortly after that. And so, yeah, I agree. Turbo manifold would be pretty
You
short on
actually
the list.
were a victim of the turbo manifold on your truck after you turned it up a fair bit.
Yeah, I mean a little more than double the horsepower, pretty closer to triple. But yeah, it broke my cylinder head. It pulled so hard on the manifold. So,
Yeah, just because it shrunk the manifold, and then like either if you're lucky, it causes a leak, and otherwise it could crack the ear off.
And it wasn't like all of your ears or a lot of your ears were broken.
Yeah.
Like really,
That's
like
pretty bad.
like your head was junk after that.
Yeah, I tried to weld it back together just to get me by for a day to go to work because it was my work truck. Didn't happen. No.
Yeah. So yeah, manifold is cheap insurance. It's one of those things you should do on a 12 valve like a KDP. Like you those things shrink, they're old, and you will have maybe small damage or it could be catastrophic. So manifold's a big deal.
I have lots of friends and acquaintances that borrow my vehicles, or maybe my wife drives it and they don't know, and they might floor it and hot rod it when it's stone cold. And so I'm a little nervous about like head gaskets at that level.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't remember if we did head studs or not.
We did not.
We didn't, and we just retorqued the head bolts. So those power-driven head bolts, that's something else I definitely would put in there a little bit stronger. Me, because I would be chasing more power or ultimate reliability, I probably would have gone right to a head stud. And to be honest with you, the chance of me having that low of a mileage of truck, it's not going to happen. I'm going to have a truck with 300,000 miles that I'm doing that to. I'm probably going right to a full new toe-ported cylinder head so I can get it O-ringed. So... I mean, I'm just saying if I did that, you don't need it for that power level. But I'm just talking for ultimate reliability. I'd be doing a manifold, a turbo, cylinder head. I'd be putting head studs if I was doing a new head.
Yeah, I don't know that I would. I mean, I would because I know me and you know you, and that's not going to be the end of it. But if I truly was looking for a 400 horsepower truck, like my goal is a 300 to 400 horsepower truck.
Good towing work truck.
I don't think pulling the head off is the play. I think the head bolts are actually a really economical, solution because you need to retorque them. They're stronger than a stock head bolt, and I think for that power level. I mean, you're not doing compounds. You're not.
Yeah, and I was
have,
forgetting about the rocker arms. What you're going to spend?
Yeah, the
500 or
rocker arm.
600.
Yeah, by the time you do all that stuff, it's. I mean, that for
snowballs
me,
quick.
I mean, I love that stuff, and I would totally do it because I know I'm going to go beyond it. But if truly 400 horsepower is my goal, man, just throwing some head bolts in there, get them torqued up right, and you live a long time, save a bunch of money for that turbocharger you might want to buy, or but maybe a fancier three-piece, maybe a three-piece manifold, or you do a Steed manifold. I mean, a lot of money you can save from that going somewhere else, a better exhaust system. I mean, we haven't talked about an intake yet. For sure, I'd put an intake.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think of it. I mean, right away regardless of what turbo's on there, I'd be getting a higher flow intake setup on there.
Yeah. What about you, Myer? If this is your truck, what are you doing?
So I think you covered the turbo and the manifold. Those would be pretty high up on the list just because you get that better EGT control, better towing ability. I think one of the first things I would do is address the fuel system. I would want a fuel pressure gauge in there because I love fuel pressure gauges in all my rigs. That way I can watch the filter and make sure it's not being clogged. check to make sure the factory system's healthy. But also, I'd be either buying a Torque Tech overflow valve or doing something along those lines. Bump that pressure up a little bit. Factory overflow valve opens like 20 psi. I know, like that being a 175 pump, especially, it would really appreciate a little bit more pressure than that. I'd get into like the 40s, the 45 psi
You feed
range.
it 40 plus, it's gonna be much happier.
And then you can see, like, you might at 300-400 horse, your stock lift pump, depending which stock lift pump you got, it could be capable of that, but you can see and make sure it's not dropping pressure. And if it is, like you can do a hot rod lift pump, which is a great option.
One thing we didn't do, and I'm shocked we didn't do, but again, the purpose of this build is power only, is we didn't put a KDP kit in this thing.
That's true.
I mean, I don't know if it had it or not, but if you're talking like something you must do, like
That's a good one for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, probably arguably the first mod you should do on that truck is the killer dowel pin kit.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It
You
is a
got to
good clean
get it
truck.
reliable. It doesn't matter how much power you make if the dowel pin falls and you have a monster oil leak out
Mhm.
the front of your engine.
They got
So
a big job ahead of you.
A KDP kit with a front seal with a wear sleeve.
Yeah.
I don't even mess around with the non-wear sleeve ones anymore.
I did, and I regret it. I did a fresh build, and I thought, oh, the snout looks beautiful. I'll just throw a seal on it, and it leaks. I should have put a wear sleeve on. It was stupid.
So yeah, that'd be one of the first mods. And actually, that was like to my truck. I did that while it was still stock. Other than the fact that I had G56, but like whatever.
Well, we didn't have our KDP kit at that time either.
That's true.
So, I mean, we even if we would have done it, it would have been somebody else's. But now we do have it.
Yeah, it's very complete now, so it's really nice. So the 6064 is really the play for this power level.
Mhm.
It is amazing turbo, and we have another one coming out soon. It's close enough I can announce it, but another one we have our HE351 base turbo, which has that
Mhm.
9 centimeter housing with a little bit bigger turbine wheel.
Mhm.
So like we went bigger on the turbine wheel, smaller on the turbine housing. So it's a just different way to skin the same cat, and that's also going to be a very good option. But that one is not drop-in. It's got
Yeah.
a 4-inch outlet, but that's also a very good 400 to 500 horsepower turbo and beyond. But anyway,
Oh, if we're talking about new things coming out, I would put that stainless HX35 exhaust elbow that's about to hit the market because it looks beautiful.
I
all
just
right?
saw like the light in Will's eyes.
we talk about new stuff. Ooh.
So yeah, I'm going to put a made in America cast 304 stainless exhaust outlet because why would I want to put that crunchy exhaust back onto my new turbo?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's,
yeah.
that's gonna be
Or
out
new
here.
exhaust.
Yeah, yeah, your new exhaust. Your
I
beautiful
mean, I've
exhaust.
got new exhaust, but I mean, like, there's still a little angled cast pipe in between there. I don't want to reuse that crap.
And
I
it's-
want
it
new,
fl-
beautiful
One
stainless.
that flows a little better would be nice too.
Oh my God.
So yeah, but at that power level, those things are really good options, and you'll hear more and see more about their turbo here in the near future. But yeah, so that's, I mean, if you're like 500 horsepower, like the 500 horsepower, or do you want to talk? We're talking about maybe the 400 horsepower mega tow guys. Like, do you go compounds at that point? But that's a whole nother build.
I mean, I guess one thing I would want to address is if your truck's like leaking from every orifice, that would also be something I would address.
Well, let's pretend like we're this truck, low mileage, get away
Okay.
from the high mileage. So
It's still 30 years old.
So you have a but if I was doing that same build and I was doing a dedicated tow rig at that double the horsepower level, I wouldn't put that single disc South Bend clutch in there. I would put a dual disc street clutch in there.
Yeah.
If it was an automatic, we didn't
built
do
trans
that
or
on this
something.
build, but you can have a built trans. But I mean, we could talk difference in what else would you do different?
Well, I think Myer's right. Like these old trucks are gonna be leaking oil. Like I do, like for sure, valve cover gaskets. When you pull them off, they're gonna be probably cracked and brittle.
I was thinking like a billet tappet cover.
Yeah.
Or just like, I mean, you can reseal your factory tappet cover. They are a terrible design. It really takes some skill to get right. I've always just gone straight to a billet tappet cover, so I don't have to worry about that anymore.
That's why those sell so well, honestly, because they're easier to install if you're. Yeah.
And then I'd probably do a dual valve cover breather as well. That way I'm not puking oil out the.
So you just let that blow by come out easily, so it doesn't push on the remaining seals in the engine.
Yeah, it keeps everything leaking less. And yeah, the valve cover is a much better place to get that crankcase
And
pressure from.
they work great on skid steers, so obviously
Yeah.
they're going to work great on your truck. I have 2 of them in my truck, by the way.
They do work really well.
They're awesome.
And I mean, either way, you're upgrading the transmission, either with an automatic or a standard. At this old of a vehicle, I mean, you take rear main seal while you're there.
It's very tempting, yes.
Yeah.
If it's, I mean, I'd be
If
definitely
it's-
checking it to see if it's wet.
If it's wet, yeah.
And
If it's dry, I would say don't touch it. I don't know. New
each
ones
his
are
own.
pretty reliable, so
Again, I would be doing a wear sleeve. If I had to touch it, it'd be a wear sleeve just
Rear
because
sleeve,
I
new
hate,
sleeve, new
hate touching
seal.
them.
Yeah.
What about turbo? What would you do different if this was a dedicated tow rig, Todd?
Well,
If this was a dedicated 300 horsepower tow rig, then I feel like the 6064 is like basically the best
There is.
as best. I mean, we were talking about the other one that like HE351 base charger.
Mhm.
Those we haven't done a lot of
mean,
testing on towing with
What
that,
about
but either
the
would be a
ultimate
good
towing
option.
compounds though at that level? You
Well,
don't need them, but at the same time, it will tow better if you're building an ultimate tow rig at 300 horse.
It would. Yeah. I mean, compounds are better from 0 to whatever power they make. They're better than a single turbo always, in my opinion. But they come with a definite budget. You know, you got to think about that. They're not the cheapest thing in the world.
Mm-hmm. I think if I had a 300 horse tow truck, I would throw one of those chargers on it and be pretty happy for quite a while.
Yeah.
And then if I got the bug for more or wanted to build or actually do some trailer racing, then I would be thinking about some compounds.
That's
when
a new
you do-
sport we should start, trailer racing.
But when you do the compounds, like that's a whole thing you have to realize. Like, oh, you're not just going to do compounds.
You also need O-ring head. You need
Yeah.
everything. And
Now
that's
you-
why
You're going to get in a lot of money there.
Now you're back to where Will talked about. Like, if you're pulling the O-ring head off anyway, get O-rings. Let's go ahead and get a little toe port in there because that really is going to make a big difference in how the thing performs.
Mm-hmm.
And so now
You're
you're
going to pick up some fuel economy with that
Yeah.
freer flowing head and the swirl. It's going to make better like torque right off idle with
yeah,
that high
'cause that
swirl.
better
port
mixing
there.
in there. And so yeah, at that point, compounds, you're thinking, you got to do something with the head.
Mm-hmm.
And head studs will not be enough on a 12 valve. Like we know this for sure. You're going to need O-rings at a minimum. And really that's what you need at this power level.
Yeah.
I wouldn't bother with the fire rings at this power level, just a good O-ringed head. Then if you ever have something, your local shop can get us just a standard head gasket and fix it, but it shouldn't give you any issues.
Mhm. And that is another like problem. I want to say with problem, but with compounds is like a lot of these parts in the aftermarket are rated with a horsepower rating, like a clutch that's rated to this much horsepower. Like that, probably that clutch that was installed in this video is rated to 350 horsepower. I guarantee you, I could burn that up at 350 horsepower with compounds because the amount of torque it'll
Yeah.
make.
I mean, it already has to deal with 800 plus. it's right on the edge right now at
Yeah.
300 horse.
With some minimal mods.
They probably were when South Bend made that. They probably were like, VP, you know, the computer's dumb. It's not going to give them all that torque. 12 valve.
Gimme.
So the compounds would be amazing.
They tow great, but you need a good amount of supporting mods for that.
You do. And then,
And I think you should experience, I don't want to hate on people going straight to compounds because if you know what you want, go for it.
yeah.
But if you're your first time, you don't really necessarily know what you want. I think everyone should experience just a good, solid single charger. It probably will act a lot better than you think it's going to.
Yeah, singles are actually very fun for it. They kind of hit a little harder than compounds. Like they kind of almost feel faster in that initial smack, especially as your singles get bigger. It makes a bigger difference. But yeah, a good running single that's sized for what you want to do, really pretty capable, more than people might think so.
So as a more experienced diesel enthusiast, or maybe I was younger and dumber when I started, my goal was never 300 horsepower.
Nope.
My goal when I started was 500. That would be the ultimate nirvana. If I had a 500 horse truck, all my dreams will be fulfilled. You know, all my goals in life.
It's like voting for Pedro. All your dreams will come true.
So I want a 500 horsepower 12 valve, Todd, and I started with this mid 70,000 mile clean truck. What would you do at 500 horsepower?
Is this a tow truck that you are hauling a trailer with, or is this a fun daily?
Both.
Both.
Not dedicated. It's a weekend tow truck so that I can justify why I needed a new turbo bearing to my wife or needed new blinker fluid.
Yes.
I think at 500 horse, I would be very tempted to run that's like a 60-64 single, maybe a 62-65.
I was just thinking that 62-65.
It's great option. You're going to lose a little bit of, it's a little bit bigger charger. You're going to lose some towing manners, but it will still do it very well. I think once you start getting into that 600 horsepower range, that's when compounds start to rule.
Yeah.
So 500, we're still talking single. What are we doing with the head at 500? Reliable here.
I think you can get away with studs on a factory gasket. That factory gasket, after it's been crushing 30 years now, if you can get that gasket to give some good clamping force, it generally holds a very good amount of power. Once you break that seal, another factory gasket will not seal as well as that one.
Yeah, brand new. Definitely going to need.
And so if you're going to do a head, O-rings.
I mean, I got the junker to 500, but after it blew at 550 horse, I was never, maybe 600, I was never able to get a factory gasket to seal as good as that. Like it's just, you
it's been
can't get
crushing,
enough heat
yeah.
cycles and crush on there. So
I mean, yeah, check your head bolts after, 25 years. I mean, they're down to 80, 90 foot-pounds. That means it crushed a lot. And it's stuck. You have to scrape that gasket off.
I'd make the argument myself at 500. I'm getting O-rings in there. I think it's
For reliability.
prudent. You don't need it until you do.
Yeah. I mean, especially if this is your truck you're going out, taking reliably able to go out to, states away, go beat on it for your friends and come back. O-rings are probably the option. If it's like a local rig that you don't take that far, I think you can
here's
try.
the other thing we're talking about. At 500 horse, it's not reasonable. A lot of guys have pulled the factory retainers through their valve springs. They start floating valves. You need to do valve springs. So you're either doing that in frame on the head, praying you don't drop a valve with either moving the pistons up to the top or, putting air in the cylinders. Another way people do that. Or you're pulling the dang head off and fixing it and putting the valve springs in. At that point, if you're doing that to O-ring, I'm telling you that Isky Groove-O-Matic I used to use doesn't really do that good of a job.
Yeah, it sucks.
It doesn't compete with a CNC cut O-ring groove. Let me just put it that way. So that's why I'm saying I'm going right to a cylinder head. Already has the valve springs on it. It's fresh. It's got the swirls so that it spools. You're going to make more power with the ported head. If your budget allows.
It's a quicker swap. I mean, than doing all that work.
Yeah.
And you don't have to get the ported head. You can just get a regular head that's O-ringed. But I'm like, gosh, by the time you surface a head and clean it and put all that in there, you might as well just buy a new head.
Yeah. At this point, I don't think a stock lift pump is probably a good idea.
A bone stock? No.
Like the 300, 400 horsepower mark where the fuel's limited, you probably get away with it. At 500 horsepower, I know.
There's a couple
truck,
different springs that come in their
Yeah.
factory. So, I mean, that's where that fuel pressure gauge comes in. I mean, if you want to just know you don't have to worry about it, a hot rod lift pump's a great option up to like 600-700 horse. But put a fuel pressure gauge on it. When you start losing, you'll know you need it.
Or when it starts popping. On you.
Yeah.
That's how I knew. In my very first truck, I put a 300 S300 on it and some stuff, and I'd hot rod it, and it started popping. I didn't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, man, what is wrong with my truck? I'm like, I broke it. And it runs just fine until I'm like, full tilt. When I didn't have fuel pressure. And so, yeah, if you're popping, you need something a little more.
Yeah, definitely.
So
I had a similar thing. My first truck I really modified was a V10 originally. It had a fuel pump in the tank. I was like, I'm going to run these two in series. That way I get like the super pressures. After like 50 miles, that lift pump in the tank did not like getting sucked through at higher PM. It wasn't able to supply enough.
Oh.
And so it drained the pressure between stages, and then it didn't appreciate that very much, and it failed. And the moment it failed, after like over like 100 horse, it just sit there and pop.
Yeah.
And you let off, and then you get into it again and feel okay. And then once you got like to where you started sucking it out, it just started popping again. You have to let out and do it again.
Yeah.
So let's say you're building your 12 valve, however many miles it has, doesn't matter. But now it's not a dedicated tow truck. This is your 750 horsepower toy.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing, Myer? 750 horse, clean slate. Nothing's done to the truck. What are you doing to it to get there reliable?
Oof. So if this is my weekend warrior and that's the only time I drive it, I'm okay with a little bit of lag because it's like, I have to put in the calendar where I want it to spool, but I can do that with a single. If this is like my daily that I'm driving to and from work, or I just want to be able to just drive it really nice, I would 100% go to compounds, because then you're not having to like, it's just, you got that response off the bottom. It drives really nice still, but it makes 750 horse and it's fun to drive. That's what I would do. And then, I mean, like you said, you need O-rings, so you might as well do a head at that point. Hot rod lift pump may or may not be able to keep up. That's you just you can go to
750 is a lot for a hot rod lift pump. I think
it depends on how the engine's built and if you need the air to make that fuel burn.
Is Papa Stump still run hot rod lift pump?
Yes, it's running a hot rod lift pump at like a high 800s because it's got a ported head and good compounds. It's got a lot of extra air there that's able to burn the fuel very efficiently. You put that same lift pump on a truck with a single, you're not going to burn. You don't have that excess of air. You're not going to make that same power. And it's so then that situation, like 650s
high 700s on the junker, and it was pulling the pressure down to zero.
My dad still maintains like 35 psi at like 550 cc's. So
does it have bigger lines and stuff?
Yeah, half-inch sump, all that thing, which that really helps us.
Yeah, I was kind of using.
Our lift
I didn't have a
pumps.
sump. I was using factory lines and stuff. So
which are pretty small.
Yeah.
So
On the
Um,
suction side, I was using factory. So yeah, you got
I'm trying to think of what else, like for 750, what you do. I mean, like you say, you got, I mean, the basic engine mods, head, push
what about
rods.
the pump though? Are you going to get
pump.
there?
So if you had a 96 to 98, you can, like, it's a 215 manual truck. You
So manual
can do
transmission.
some stuff in there. You're just yourself to try to get that power level. Let me re-say that. You can do some stuff. You can do some of that stuff yourself to get to that power level. If you got 180, 160, like basically any other year, a 12 valve that's an auto or earlier manual, it's, you kind of have to get it benched to be able to, for like a builder to be able to get everything out of it to get to that level.
Yeah. Reality is the 180 and the 160 pumps suck.
I mean, they're good pumps, but when you're trying to make power, basically everything about a 215 pump is better. The refill on the cam, the better plungers, just everything.
Everything's better.
I mean, you would probably save enough money getting a 215 pump.
If
I
you
mean,
can
it costs money.
if you can
versus-
find one.
I'm just talking the turbo system you'd have to, because I got my 160 pump up to that 750 horsepower level, but I had way more money in turbos and head and
Yeah, you
all
need
this other
you
stuff.
Need, I mean, you had dual lift pumps trying to get the pressure to it. You had more air than you needed to be able to get the fuel to burn efficiently to get to that power level.
And it still was a low RPM motor. Like you could not carry power with that thing.
yeah, it was, I mean, and then after I put a 215 pump on my truck, it's like, holy cow, the exact same parts. Now all of a sudden it's making mid 800 horsepower easily. And
Yeah.
it was like,
So those of you guys don't know, we talk about, I just said the cam and the plungers. The cam is better because it allows more refill time, so the plunger can fill with fuel for a longer amount of time, which helps high RPM performance. And then the plunger's better. There's been a myth going around for a long time. I think it's mostly gone, but that a 215 plunger retards timing, that is a myth. It actually advances timing. So depending if the pump is built, you get about 7 degrees of advance, as well as a factory 180 pump. Let's just say you got to do the round of DVs and all that stuff. You can get about 450 cc's out of it or so. You do those same exact mods to a 215
on
pump.
a dedicated race truck, you can get them
You
to
can get more.
500 with full cuts, but it's not streetable.
No, so like
it's like a sled pull only. So 450,
like a good
for
mild
the
street pump is about 450 is what you get. You do the same exact mods, so you have the same exact drivability on a 215 pump, and you're able to get deep into the 600 cc's. I mean, that's 200 cc's more.
That's massive.
Yeah,
and then
that's
just for
gonna help.
baseline, what is a stock like calibration 215 pump? Was it like
does like 103, I think, is the answer. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it's 103 cc's. It's on your timing cover.
So anyway, yeah, 215 pumps are the bomb for anything, and so big believers in 215 pumps.
Yeah, so if you're going for 750 horse, you can try to make do with your one, but
what about the trans though? So you talk about how the 215 is great, you have a manual trans, but I don't think a manual transmission NV4500 is reliable at 750, even
No.
with a good
Or-
clutch.
Or less.
I mean, they're really, to me, over 500, you're starting to.
yeah, for sure. I mean, lots of
Borrowed
people make
time.
1,000 horsepower on NV, and people like NV 4500s for the only reason that they're cheap to rebuild. And so if you don't mind rebuilding your NV 4500 every once in a while, that's not a
And you
terrible
only
option.
beat on it in fourth gear where it will hold a lot of power. Great. But you beat on it in third, it's going to break. Beat on fifth, it's going to break. Beat
Yeah.
on it in second, well,
Mhm.
it's hard to beat on it in second because you can't even get big turbo spooled in second gear half the time.
Yeah, and then I mean, if this is a dedicated fun truck at 750 horse, that's one thing about a manual trans is you got to spool it through every single gear. With an automatic, it's really nice, whether it's auto or full manual valve body auto. You spool it once, you're done, and you just rip through the gears, and then like feeling it shift under power is also quite satisfying. Like it's a good time.
But at 750, we wouldn't say you need to get into the bottom end. You're just doing
No,
top end head work,
No.
O-rings or fire rings or whatever you're doing there to hold the head down, good head studs. So, I mean, Todd, now we're
Wh-
starting to get in it.
Which, if you think about it, it's pretty amazing because at 750 horsepower, you're probably around 1,500 foot-pounds of torque.
Mhm.
And you're telling everybody here, like, yeah, to put 1,500 foot-pounds of torque to the tire, not crank, to the tire, to the ground, we don't have to get in the bottom end.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
not-
you had your blue truck and we tore apart. It was like doing high 600s, and it looked beautiful on the bottom end. I have my 12 valve that I moved from Missouri with, and it's still doing low 700s or so, and it's a bone stock factory bottom end. It's never been apart, and it's run out of oil more times than it's oil's been changed. it's still rocking.
And so it is, I mean, again, that's why people love this engine, because you don't have to, I mean, getting the bottom end's kind of expensive. Like you're talking about pulling the motor and a full rebuild, and honestly, over 750 horsepower, you're probably going to be there pretty sooner than later anyway. You're going to end up pulling stuff out and adjusting your clearances so you can actually live.
That's something nice about your older 12 valves, like the ones without the storm block. They got factory 14 millimeter mains.
Yeah.
That's solid hardware. Really, your first weak point is the rod bolts, and then like 12 valve rods are basically the race rods. So yeah, 750, you're pretty good till that point.
Factory forged stuff, it doesn't come apart; it just bends. So.
Yeah.
If it starts white smoking after you get after it hard, yeah, you probably bend some rods. But hey, there's not a hole in the block.
Yeah, and after the 750 horsepower mark, you're probably getting into a lot more custom things. Like 750 horsepower, you can still use a drop-in style turbo on the manifold and put like a 476, 480 in there, you know, and you're making it. Once you're going beyond 750, you're pretty much making some custom stuff that you're not just ordering out of a catalog. Like, you know, give me this turbo kit out of a catalog. At least not yet. But you know, you're going to have a bigger turbo on the manifold, a bigger turbo for the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Your head it's probably now a bit more of a racy head, a stage 1, stage 2.
I mean, what would you pick for turbos for 750 horse compounds? Fun street truck.
Ooh.
12 valve.
I think that new turbo we talked about a few minutes ago. All right, Mike.
Let me
go, Myer, go.
So
he's over here peeing his pants. Go ahead.
What I did pick for 750 horse, 351, 472. That was a really good setup, or 476. Just either one of those. That was a really, really good setup. That's what I gave my dad, and it ran really, really good. I ended up switching to a 480 on the atmosphere first because I wanted to see how it acted, and second, like that setup with being a 6.1 stroker, it got driven pretty darn hard all the time, especially when you're cruising, you know, 48 things. So your overdrives, you know, you're still cruising at 2,300 RPM or so. At that situation, it would make a lot of boost, which was awesome for EGT control. But it would make a lot of boost, and I wanted to see how it would do with 480. So I think if I had a true 5.9, I would be doing and trying to go for 750. That's my setup: a 351, 472, 476, one of those two. And if I was trying to get into the 800s or higher, I'd be doing a 351, 480, and that would do the mid 800s very, very, very easily.
Now, is this a bone stock 351 or is this a modded 351?
Big turbine. So like one of our 60, 67s is what my dad has.
Yeah,
and it runs really, really good.
And like that's the turbo we're talking about. Like we will still soon have that 6067 in a HX35 compressor cover.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that way it bolts on still. You don't have to do all the mod stuff that I had to do to make it work.
Exactly. Much easier kit. So yeah, that's an amazing turbo system. You have a 215 pump on that?
It does. It has a 215 pump that we went through, and it does about 550 cc's.
And obviously you built trans.
Yep.
You did a full manual valve body so you can have total control of it.
This is my dad. He wanted a 47 RH, and I was like, you know what would really be the bomb diggity?
And full manual valve body.
Full manual valve body. So we full manual valve bodied and 47 RH, which some people view as a sin, but it was an amazing upgrade.
It's a super fun truck. The EGT control on that is just ridiculous. So yeah, I mean that's your 700, 800 horsepower build. But once you start, you know, cracking, I mean, from there it's just how high do you want to go? How much do you want to spend? Like, do you need 13 mil pump, 14 mil pump, 16 mil pump? Like, it just gets ridiculous. And are you a dedicated race vehicle? Because in the 12 valves, I mean, we got pretty good recipes now for, you know, 1,000 horsepower street trucks. Like Papa Stump's truck is right there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look at 1,000 horsepower to the ground, still can tow. Not as with the power jets.
I mean, I would say he's about 900 to the ground.
900 ground.
Fuel only to the ground, and can tow like way too well. It's got 18 degrees of timing.
Yeah. So right there, you probably have another 50 horsepower just in a timing bump.
Probably at least.
Yeah. So, I mean, and you're not in our biggest power jets.
No, they are. Yeah, they're. I don't remember which ones they are, but I think they're a 5x12 base, so that'd be about our stage 2, I think.
Yeah. And so like I firmly believe that truck could be at 1,000 horsepower if you wanted to, and still tow well. I mean,
it won't tow as well,
exactly.
And that's why it's not doing it.
Because it is a dual tow truck.
The hard parts could all be tuned differently to make it make that number.
So that's pretty fun. Because when you first came here, you thought 1,000 horsepower street tow truck was impossible.
With a 12 valve.
With a 12 valve, probably.
Because when Mike Hudson's truck was at 900 dyno, you're like, dude, we could do 1,000 horsepower 12 valve and have it be tow friendly. You're like, yeah, and you're like, I didn't know that was possible.
Yeah,
and then you built it.
I guess I did, yeah.
Yes, you did. And so, I mean, to get 1,000 horsepower tow trucks is still, and that tow truck can tow well? Like not just like
I built it to be a 400 horse tow truck and tow amazing, and whatever it actually made, like, so be it.
and it's double that.
Pretty much.
So that's very possible. I mean, Will, you have probably the most radical street 12 valve here.
I mean, so my race truck, I got up to like 1500 and I kept splitting blocks. So I was like, 1500 is too much for a factory 12 valve block. And so I decided that I had not broken one at 1200. I got, quite a few laps at 1200. So I would say 1200 in my opinion is the upper limit of a street driven 12 valve, not a tow. I mean, I've towed with my truck.
Yeah.
But it's not a tow truck. It is a toy. It's a
towable truck, not.
I honestly think you got the wrong turbos. I think you got a 1600 horsepower turbo set on a 1200 horsepower engine. That's what I think.
but I mean, it tows better than it did with any single turbo I've ran before. Yeah. Just more so. I mean, big timing. If you want the big power, it's just it's kind of loose, so it's got a little more blow by to deal with and things like that. And then engine technologies come better. I mean, we have better honing like I want to build another engine for it, even though it's not worn out, because there's so much better technology and ring packages.
Just in the last 2 years.
Just in the last 2 years that I know I could make it better. Our heads swirl a lot more. I know I could make it spool faster. But yeah, around that 1200. But it's a 467 over a 106 GT55.
Yeah.
Compound setup, Steed manifold, 6.1 stroker. Got a big high flow, power driven street head on there. Yeah, I'm running like 26 degrees of timing. Yeah. Fire rings. I mean, it's got, and like I said, it's fun, but I honestly think your dad's tow truck, the Papa Stump at 800, is more fun on the street because it spools faster.
Yeah, I would say that if you took like people out for rides, your truck is funner. But as far as like just driving it every day, I enjoy it more. I enjoy mine more because I'm able to do it every stoplight, not smoking anyone out.
I drove to the airstrip and they had some drag racing there, and I think I ran a couple like 7.0 passes around 100 miles an hour. 7.1, 7.0. I launched hard, and it's like that's great. I mean, that's in the 8th mile. That's fast. I mean, that's like
it's moving.
11-second quarter mile type stuff. But at the same time, I'm like, your dad's would it run like a 7.3 or 7? Yes. I mean, it's only like a 10th,
like a 7.4, I think,
like a 10th or 2 behind it, and
I towed another truck there.
You towed a truck there.
Yeah, the manners are much much better.
And I feel like, I mean, I've lugged mine pretty hard. I don't think the block's gonna break on mine, but it's definitely. I have to have nice rods in there. Does your dad's truck have rods?
No,
in it?
It has rod bolts.
But see, you're on factory rods, and I think I would bend factory rods at my power level, and it's not really that much faster.
Yeah. Just for you guys out there to know, I have been well beyond 1500 horsepower on a 12 valve block, and you were there, but I did it in a much different way because Will's trying to do it on a street friendly tune, which means he's going to be doing it at a much lower RPM than I did it. So the blocks can handle more. You just got to make it at 4,500 RPM, not 3,000.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue the torque limit is what we're at. It seems like around 2,400 foot-pounds to the tire, the block has problems. And it seems like around 2,200 foot-pounds is when you bend factory rods. So it's like you put billet rods in there and you're not getting a lot more torque capacity. Unless you go like Todd and build monster triples, because if he's making 2,400 foot-pounds the limit, but he's doing it at 4,000 RPM, all of a sudden he has an 1,800. Didn't you get a little over? I think you get a 2,000 almost on a 5.9 block.
I don't remember if I ever got that high. 1,800 is the number I have in my mind. So, yeah.
At least 1,800 though. And I've never been, I think the highest I've ever gotten to is like mid 16s, and I've broken my share.
Yeah, once you get that high, everything's custom, everything's
expensive.
Everything's expensive, and things break. So
and more temperamental. You kind of start losing I'm gonna go turn it on and go start it up in the dead of winter.
Everything.
Something else you just don't want to do that to it.
I actually started mine today, and it's the last day of January. Hasn't been plugged in for a month, so it didn't take much.
Yeah. No, I think one piece of advice I would give to anyone is, you may think like, oh, okay, everyone talks about this 1,000 horse truck. I want to just start like go from stockish to 1,000 horse, I think it's definitely a good idea to go through the paces and start at, go from 300 horse to 500 horse to 700 horse to 800 horse, all of it, just feel like play around with every single step, because the higher you go, like, yeah, it's more fun while you're flooring it, but it's not nearly as much fun overall because you just can't use it the way you did when you had a 600 horse truck that you could beat the living H out of every single day and just, it would keep taking it.
Yeah, like on the street, it really makes a difference, like how much power you make. Like I used to it is fun having a truck like Papa Stomp's truck because you don't have to like wait for a long enough road to actually when I had the triple turbos in Frankenstein, you didn't do nothing in town, nothing. I mean, you needed a lot of road because it's so radical. I mean, it's super fun, but when you start making race trucks on the street, you start realizing this isn't as much fun as I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
and if you need 4-wheel drive to like feel the power, because it spins so easy, and two, it's like once you get past about 800,
yeah,
it does rolling burnouts so easy at 20 and 30 mile an hour that it's like,
or 70 or 80, I mean, depending.
I mean, just
A little past 800 there, but
yeah,
yes.
you're probably good.
And I'm
Sorry.
talking like a rolling controlled burnout. That's one thing. I'm talking like if you don't lift, you're going to crash type rolling burnout. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah, where your tack and your speedo just both go to the very far end.
instantly.
It is kind of cool to watch.
It is.
I'll tell you that.
But you're right. Like on my Mega Cab, this is common rail stuff, but I mean, that is a 1,500 horsepower truck. I'm very happy because I spent a whole day out there tuning. I want to do a third gear roll on and not have it blow the tires off in two-wheel drive. So I have a really good, floor in third gear and just have it go straight.
Have it be the right power level so it just barely doesn't blow them
Just
off.
kind of skirting the tires a little bit, not, just kind of fun.
but that's if you give someone a joyride or whatever you want to call it in there, they feel the power more when it's hooked up like that,
Oh, yeah.
and it blows their mind. You turn it on the highest tune and you're not in 4-wheel drive, and they're like, yeah, this doesn't feel any faster than my Camaro. And you're like, that's because it's not what it's doing, a rolling burnout.
I remember I took a coworker for a ride, and he was kind of being like, he was a good buddy at the time, but he was being a little, I gave him a ride and he was like, that was okay. That's pretty fast. And I slowly did more and more and more. And he's like, that's pretty good. And I was like, okay. And he's like, oh, well, because I asked, like, going into it, like, what's the fastest you've been? And I think he said like a Hellcat or something stupid. I was like, well, you want to get out now or later? And he's like, no, let's do it. So yeah, he's like, oh, it was okay. It was okay. And I was like, okay, finally. I was like, I'll show you something that your Hellcat didn't do. And so at like 80 miles an hour, I got pretty squirrely. Like one of the squirreliest I've ever been in that truck. And he was like clenched and everything. And like, yeah, let's see your Hellcat do that.
Yeah, that'll definitely wake you up.
Sideways at 80 miles an hour from horsepower.
Yikes.
And like, truth be told, I was definitely sawing the wheel a little bit to try to give the effect. But yeah, I was like, let's see your Hellcat do that.
Yeah, exactly. Torque for the win. So anyway, well, and I don't know how much to add on the 12-valve stuff. I mean, big power is cubic dollars, but you can have a really good truck. Like, the Papa Stomp truck, that dually is like, to me, like the pinnacle of awesome street trucks. Like, it's probably one of our favorite builds I've ever seen.
Do it all. Yes. I mean, if you want the do it all truck, shoot for that 800 horsepower compounds, clean tuning, AFC Live, all the stuff in there, stroker engine. It's awesome.
Mhm.
If you want a budget friendly, keep your goal at about 500. You can do that on a pretty tight budget. And honestly, a 500 horse 12 valve will surprise a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Maybe your truck's lighter, so it's like a 500 horse. It's still boogies. I mean, it's
Yeah.
fast.
And you like another couple
It's
hundred
enough
horsepower.
that you can't just floor it everywhere. And that's when it adds like a level of fun because you're like, oh, I got to be responsible with this.
Yeah.
Even 450. My old 12 valve, same way. It was
Yeah.
450 with compounds.
Yeah, the compound's a big torque.
Yeah, but it was only 450 horsepower, but super fun to drive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when the turbos are quick, it's fun on the street. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Anyway, guys, I think that's going to wrap up this podcast. I hope you enjoyed this and kind of looking back on how to double the horsepower for 12 valve and what things have changed and what things have actually remained the same. It's kind of fun to see the different things.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that's it for me.
See you on the next one.
Thanks, guys.